White has 4 possible moves in this position, but which one leads to victory? With that, a warm welcome to the most beautiful chess problems of all time. This is a study by van der Heijden from 2003. And yes, White does have one more pawn, but securing the victory is not that easy. Feel free to pause the video to find the solution yourself. You had the chance to pause the video. Now let's take a look at the different possibilities. Let's start with the move. Pawn to e5 now. Pretty straightforward. Black basically has to capture here. And then a little pawn race begins. And with white, we are the first to promote to a queen. But black also promotes to a queen. And here, we don't have any special trick that would somehow allow us to win black's queen. That's why this is a drawn position. Back to this position. If we now think if it's not e5, it must be g5. Yeah, it doesn't look that great because black captures here. And now we have the, well, unfortunately somewhat unlucky disadvantage. Black can throw in a check here in between. And if black now gets to the pawn here, then with white we can't even promote to a queen ourselves. White. In fact, there's even a threat of checkmate here. That's why we lose in this position. But you might also think black captures the pawn here, and we simply play king to h3 and try to grab the pawn ourselves. But then comes king f3, attacking the pawn, and here the pawn on g4 continues to be supported. That's why e5 is the only move. g4, and yes, black gets there again. First to the pawn, so a win for white is not possible here. When we reach this position, there are still 2 king moves left. King h3 and king h1 indeed. King h3 looks relatively logical, but then comes king f3. Now we have to advance the pawn. We've already learned somehow that e5 is a bit more charming. We have fewer problems with checks. Black captures. g5. And then the familiar pawn race begins. And we end up again in a position where both sides have a queen on the board, and yes, there's no trick possible here anymore, so this will simply end in a draw. And as unbelievable as it may sound, we have 4 possible first moves here. g5 unfortunately is not correct. g5 unfortunately is not correct. King h3 unfortunately is also not correct. And it's the move that you might least expect at first glance. King h1. That is the correct move. With this move, white can win the game. Let's take a look at it. But how does it continue from here? Let's take a look at it. Black might get the idea to play king f3 here. First, attacking both pawns here. Then we have to move forward with our plan. And yes, we've already kind of learned that e5 is, in most cases, the slightly more charming move, because then we don't run into as many checks from the black pawns. Black has to capture here. We have to play g5 here if we want to show any winning ambitions. e4, and now comes the magical move. We play king e1 here. After e3, king f1, and e2, we manage to block the black pawn just in time. And yes, black has simply invested tempi into this pawn here. Meanwhile, our white pawn can just race through. And as soon as black tries to invest a tempo with the king to stop the pawn, well, it simply doesn't work. And then their own pawn becomes an even smaller threat to the opponent. And to finish off, something nice for the eyes. If black thinks that king e3 could be a good defense here, well, then we play e5. Black captures. And here a pawn race begins with a slight disadvantage for black. Black has to move their king out of the way. That's why, yes, white reaches the pawn first here. e2 is played. And now there's a really beautiful checkmate that I don't want to withhold from you. Queen to f8 gives check. King to e3, a relatively logical move. Queen to b4. Keeps an eye on the e1 square, the promotion square for the pawn. There's a rule. If the queen controls the promotion square, then the black king has no chance of advancing their own pawns to push forward. That's why the only option is king to f2, so that black can at least try to promote their own pawn. But how does it continue? Queen to f4. The king has to move to e1, queen to d4, and yes, the black king really doesn't have many options here. In the end, he can only go back to the f1 square, which he does, and then queen to g1. We stop the pawns by simply checkmating the opponent's king. That was today's study. And did you think that king to h1 was the right move here? The move that brings victory? Feel free to let me know in the comments. And if you're interested in more chess content, you'll probably find a linked video with another chess study here. Feel free to click on it, and then I'll see you again in the next video.